according to the linguists, it's celebrator. Celebrator may be very grammatically correct, but to my layman's ears, celebrant sounds melodious, kind of conventional. I guess we're so used to it, and it really sounds inviting. Celebrant. Celebrator seems longish and a little mouth twisting. So permit me, sir, to observe all protocols. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege, really, to be here this afternoon to carry out this very simple assignment on behalf of the Jagaban of Nigeria, the Okolomo of Africa, as they call him, and the thorn in the flesh of the political oppressors of Nigeria, and the man who has a diminutive physical presence or structure, with a very prodigious mental capacity, which all have been put to use in advancing the cause of democracy in Nigeria, all of which have been attested to by the various speakers here and by what we have seen or can see on the political landscape of Nigeria. And I'm referring to Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, who is the chief launcher or chief presenter, because we no longer launch books, because that is really synonymous or, synonymous with money, naira, and something that is of commercial nature. And that in itself, when you put a literary work or an intellectual work on the pedestal of mercantilism, there is some kind of reductionism there. It does detract from the intrinsic value of that intellectual work. And that's why we are trying to veer off that commercial perspective of book presentations. We no longer call it book launching, because you have launching for birthdays, for funeral rites, for all kinds of pedestrian and extravagant megalomaniac ventures. But an intellectual work is really something that is of high mental consequence, which should really make us reflective, sober, introspect, and look at, really ponder on our environment, on our milieu as it were, how far we have come, where we were, where we are, where we are going. And that will really give us food for thought, not for throwing naira rays and then debasing the whole essence of presenting something that is of serious consequence to our lives as a nation, as a society. And that is why the celebrator, Professor Rope Sekoni, our Egbon, we call him our Egbon. I wasn't one of his students, but I'm sure he would have taught me, because he would have taught me while, if I had attended that university, but I was very lucky to attend the Cosmopolitan University. That's the University of Lagos. The great apocalypse. But my siblings, all my siblings, my brothers and sisters, all of them attended University of Ife, and they know Professor Sekoni very well. And we used to have a sibling contest at home then. They called me, you know, you this guy from Lagos, the rough city, and I tell them that, well, we are rough, but we are very open-eyed, and that you guys from the village, you know, where's that Ife, you know, the outskirts of Ibadan, and some rustic and undulating in the backwater area of Nigeria and all of that. However, when I visited University of Ife for the first time myself, I was quite impressed with the environment, with the physical structures, with the size. The size did not bow me over because they have a lot of land to play around with. But we are from the land of the aquatic splendor here, so we are restricted as it were. But we have the largest population in Nigeria, if not in West Africa, because Lagos is about the 4th or 5th largest country in West Africa, as it were. So we used to use all these little anecdotes to engage in very healthy contest. But Professor Sekoni has held his own right from the university to the outside world, even abroad in younger land, and especially so, which is really the reason for all of us being here today, especially so his role in what I call the struggling years of Nigeria, or Nigeria's march towards democracy. And that's the struggle for the actualization of the June 12 election, and secondly, and more comprehensively, the struggle for the return of democracy to Nigeria. Professor Sekoni has played a very prominent and effective role in both struggles. And that is why, if you look around this hall this afternoon, you will see that very many prominent players in those heady years of the struggle are present here. And that is really to pay homage to whom honor is due, Professor Sekoni. Congratulations, sir. Asiwaju Bola Tinubu is unable to be physically present here today, very much to his disappointment and to the disappointment of so many of us, but for due very, very cogent reasons. I was with him a few days ago in Chicago, and we had left this country about 3.5 weeks or so thereabouts, on some political gerrymandering around the globe. In the process, we were in the UK about a fortnight ago when he developed again a pain which has been recurring on his knee, I think on the left knee. This has been something recurring now and again. It goes on and off over the last several years. And of course, he's been to several hospitals, to his doctors in the US, in the UK, and he's been managing it. He has been asked to come and do something like a replacement of his knee. And each time he's given that appointment to come for the surgery, he's always found an excuse to shift it. Of course, those excuses have not been flippant excuses. They've been very, very important, significant excuses, mainly political, because of the exigencies of our nature and our situation in Nigeria. So he's always had to shift this all the time. And I remember even in May, we were in London, and he had the same pain, and the doctor told him to come straight to the hospital for the surgery. And there was something he was going to I think there was a speech he had to make in Parliament or something, and then there was another very important event in Nigeria, and he was begging the doctor to shift it by 2 or 3 weeks, and the doctor said, look, it's your knee, not mine, so suit yourself. So he suited himself and shifted again. So this time around, I told him last week in Chicago, I said, look, if you don't go and do this thing once and for all, you'll be postponing the evil day. And the doctor then scared him and said, if he shifted it further, the thing will crash. And he won't be able to walk around. And he said, there's too much to be done in Nigeria. So he will do it this time around. So a few days ago, he had to ask me to come and represent him here. And to underscore the importance and the esteem with which he holds Professor Sekoni, he has asked me to whisper a few things to his ears, and for his ears only, not for the general public. But he's also asked me that the title of the book, Federalism and the Yoruba Character Essays on Democracy of Nationalities in Nigeria, he says I should express a few words about that, how that title synchronizes with his own worldview of Nigeria, where Nigeria should be in terms of federalism. He's asked me to actually tell the audience that Nigeria is really not a democracy yet, that we have a civilian regime in place. And there is a world of difference between a civilian dispensation and genuine democracy. He says that genuine democracy, one of the attributes of it is true federalism. And since there is an apparent lack of true federalism in Nigeria today, then there is no democracy yet. What we have, and what you and himself and General Kiriade and a whole lot of you have struggled for, is just the enthronement of civilian regime in Nigeria. That's different from militocracy. But we are yet to attain that political Eldorado, which is genuine and true democracy. And that this work is a further contribution to our march towards attaining that true democracy in Nigeria. It is a very commendable book. A lot has been said about it. The reviewer has told us so much about the book. Professor Femi, Dr. Femi, the lecturer, has also given us an insight into the book. And so, what federalism does mean to us is not the same thing that it means to those actors in Abuja. On several occasions, we've had cause of privileges, very, very selective privileges, to meet with some of these actors and engage in arguments on charting the way forward for Nigeria. And each time we met and engaged in these very rigorous intellectual exercises, you came out of such engagements with a fallen hope for Nigeria at the very worst. And this is very sad, because their mental outlook and conception of what Nigerian federalism is totally at variance with what those of us around here think federalism should be or is. And I know that, I remember quite vividly, even though a toddler, that the first death knell against federalism in Nigeria was dealt by the late General Agui Rosie's Decree 34 of 1966. That was the really first official death knell against federalism in Nigeria. And the attendant revenge coup of July 29, 1966 was as a result of this Decree 34 of General Agui Rosie of 1966. It was a reaction against that decree 34. Decree 34 was unification decree, which sought to bring Nigeria under one rule. And the North, as I recall, was very, very apprehensive of unification because they felt that they did not have the managerial skill, the entrepreneurial capacity, or even the intellectual ability to really man their own region. So they felt it was a way of subjugating the North under Igbo rule, as it were. So the coup of 1966, the July 29 revenge coup, was a violent reaction against the unification decree of January 15, which was enacted by Aguiyi Ironsi. However, one would have thought that having reacted against that unification decree, having staged the coup successfully, even though one of the bloodiest in history, the ensuing government of General Gowon will then resort to federalism, back to federalism. But ironically and conversely, that unitary system of government was further consolidated because power was now in the hands of the right people, the quote. So since then until now, we've had various perspectives and shades of unification or unitary government. We still have unitary government in practice today, even though we call ourselves federal in theory, but it's in essence a unitary system of government that we are practicing. So works like this of Professor Sekoni and contributions from others like you would help in guiding us as a people, as a society, towards attaining that overall objective of enthroning democracy in Nigeria. General Kiriade here, I must salute his courage. Apart from his exploits during the Nigerian Civil War, his exploits, as it were, permit me to use that word again, his exploits in the struggle for the enthronement of this civilian dispensation and the longer-term objective of enthroning democracy in Nigeria is unsurpassed, is unparalleled, is unassailable. And I say this with all emphasis at my disposal as a participant observer in the entire saga from January 1993 to date, and from my advantaged proximity with those prominent actors in this saga. General Akinrinade, while his house was firebombed here in Nigeria in those early days, we also used his house as the fulcrum of the nascent Nadeco Association in London in those days. I remember after the famous Epetedo declaration of my former boss, Chief M.K. Abiola, the struggle assumed a very ferocious dimension, and then we went on to this 7-week strike by the oil marketers, the Pengasan, and the tanker drivers, and all of that, all of which was seriously and meticulously organized. And then General Akinrinade, Senator Bola Tinubu, a host of others were really in the vortex of this struggle, and they were directing those of us who were leg workers. I was editor of the Concord, the paper owned by M.K. Abiola then. So willy-nilly, some of us had no choice but to be conscripted into the struggle as operatives. And so we were carrying messages back and forth from these actors at that time. So one was privileged to observe at close quarters the rigor and the vigor that was exhibited by General Akinrinade. I remember when Nadeco was then opened shop in London, when they were hounded into exile. used to use his house then off Edgware Road, Success Guidance, as the office, the official office of NADECO in London. And we met every Tuesday then. And that was the nascent days of NADECO, when we were building the various NADECO cells in Europe and all over the place then. And I remember on one occasion that I was agreeing on in those meetings, because he was there as the chief host, Senator Bola Tinubu, Professor Bola Tinubu, Chief John Oyegu, the former Edo governor then, the late Bobo Moses, if you recall, and then so many others. Tukubu Afikuyomi was there with us then. And on one occasion, while the arguments were going back and forth about how to bring back this democracy, restore June 12 in Nigeria, I was really perturbed at the seeming slow pace of this our organs and bonds in advancing the course of this thing. And I was like, maybe more violent in my own estimation. So I blotted out that, look, gentlemen, I don't understand what people are discussing here. We are talking about how to go to the European Parliament, to go and campaign there, how to stop the the proposed FIFA contest in Nigeria. Then this was in early 1995. And I said, this will not remove Abacha. Why don't we just go to Belgium, hire some mercenaries, and storm the damn country and remove all these people? And I recall General Green, and they shouted me down. He said, go and sit down. How many wars have you fought in your life? What do you know about fighting wars anyway? You just sit down in your corner as editor writing articles. You think that is how to fight wars and all that? And I was perplexed. After the meeting, we retired, myself, himself, Professor Bolaji Akeyemi, Senator Tinubu. We retired into his kitchen. And he then called me aside and said, young man, you don't say everything in an open meeting. So I discovered there was a subset of a larger set in the entire world. And I was really taught the art of revolutionary struggle, how to plan and pre-plan and map our strategies. Thank you very much for your encouragement. And up to today, General Akere is still in the throes of the struggle for the enthronement of democracy in Nigeria, with Professor Sekoni chipping in on the side, and with like-minded people like you. If you are not interested, you will not be here today to do him honor. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure, privilege, and honor to present this book by Professor Rope Sekoni, titled Federalism and the Yoruba Character, Essays on Democracy of Nationalities in Nigeria. It is a 120-page book, very deep, very comprehensive, and at the same time concise, but guiding us towards the overall objective of enthroning democracy and federalism in Nigeria, which is why we are all here. I dedicate this book to the advancement of humanity and to the glory of God. Thank you very much. By the way, to those of you expecting the Naira reign, I did establish the premise earlier on. But Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu has asked me to whisper it into the ears of Professor Rope Sekoni. He's being very decent and modest, so he doesn't want to excite the public. So I will whisper it to even Madame Sekoni. Thank you very much.